By 1857, although the Enlightened had managed to conceal the news of the internal crisis from the rest of the world, Markov's treachery ensured that the Covenant was split into two distinct factions. Custodians believed that advanced technology should be guarded and hidden from the world until humanity reached the maturity to use it, while egalitarians believed that every man and woman had the right to self-determination, and that it was the obligation of the Enlightened to work with those nations to bring about a new age. The Enlightened's most ardent scientist patron, President Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, had recently founded the Latin Alliance, a bold coalition of France, Spain, and Italy. This emergent power promised to be a safe haven for the scientists and researchers, just as the French Republic had been these past 5 years. As a signatory of the Covenant Charter, Bonaparte was obligated to establish a Promethean complex, which he did with renovation and expansion of Mont Saint-Michel. It was a meeting at Mont Saint-Michel that Juliana Drakenberg discovered that many of the secrets stolen by Markov had made their way onto the black market. Louis Napoleon had purchased many of these designs outright, as he could keep them out of the hands of rival world powers. As a continued show of good faith with the Covenant, the Latin Alliance shared everything they had acquired and kept out of the public domain. Agents note: though, as all such technologies had been stolen from the Covenant to begin with, there was little material gained for Enlightened by this gesture. I am sure that Louis Napoleon was not unaware of this fact. In the light of the destruction unleashed in the world and the origins of Markov's treachery, the custodians easily assumed complete dominance over the shell-shocked Covenant. The most influential peers ensured that those few egalitarians who remained were consigned to the fringes of the organization, effectively exiling them from the Enlightened. Though they were entitled to attend future symposia, any secrets from the vault were denied to them. The hope but denied of further inventions, these ostracized members would wither on the vine. Indeed, they most likely would have been subsumed into their own natural interests over time. Everything would have gone according to the custodian plan had not been for the actions of one enlightened pair and the sturgeon-lined casket. The Hex Seed. Desperately searching for a discovery that might save the life of his ailing wife, Veronica, Burson Carpathian had come into contact with a mysterious Dark Council. Individuals who had become bonded with an ancient alien entity known as the Hex. Agents note: what follows contains a significant degree of supposition based on anecdotal accounts when supported by what the service has witnessed in the field. I cannot help but feel that we are close to the truth of all the matter, even with a lack of hard evidence. The Hex itself existed in a geode-like seed that was hidden away from the prying eyes of the uninitiated Carpathian. Discovered the location and nature of the Hex seed, and most interestingly of all to him, that at the base of its alien geode was a huge subterranean reservoir of a crimson fluid. The fluid was referred to as the essence of the Hex, but other than helping fuel arcane powers or being ingested to cause physical mutation or transformation, the potential of the fluid was largely untapped. The viscous crimson liquid was provided to him in small doses and seemed to invigorate his mind when a single drop was imbibed. Tantalized by the invigorating properties of essence, Carpathian thought that he might hold a secret to returning his wife to health. With the aid of his allies in the Enlightened, Carpathian managed to steal the seed. The Dark Council had agents throughout Europe, and Carpathian reasoned that it would not be long before he was identified as the architect of the theft. Nowhere in Europe would be safe for the experimentation he intended. But two of the Enlightened here in the Union of the Federated States had offered him sanctuary. Gustav Eiffel and the brilliant geologist Petronella Gage they had been forced into exile thanks to their support of Markov's insurrection. They had secured the town of Payson in the Arizona Territory, and this was an ideal home for Carpathian and his work. Shattered. Crossing the Atlantic on the steamer Lady B, Carpathian, his wife Veronica, and their allies were aware that their prospective vast nature was racked with tensions as the northern and southern states vied for control of the vast resources of the continent. They had hoped to arrive unnoticed. However, they could not have been more wrong. Agents note, here we must again make an educated guess based on the available facts. As you know, the very existence of a Dark Council is difficult to verify, let alone to what extent. If any has influence here in Washington, what follows in regard to General Grant is taken from information supplied in confidence by our friend Garrett Morden. Though his candor is appreciated, I feel it's unlikely you are welcomed by General Grant, should you share any of the following with him. The Dark Council undoubtedly would have found itself severely weakened by Carpathian's actions. Clearly, it was still more than capable of exerting its own influence and exacting revenge. Carpathian had been marked for death. Using what resources and connections it had, the Dark Council manipulated Odysseus Grant, who was at the time a promising army captain, now reputed to have fallen to drink and paranoia. Fueled by rumors of a fresh European threat to the security of the Union, Grant was set on a course to destroy Carpathian and his newly arrived enlightened entourage. Taking the travellers completely by surprise, Grant's bombardment killed most of the enlightened landing party, and Carpathian was smashed like a ragdoll against the seed-carrying casket. He had risked too much to bring to these shores. Twisted and broken, and consciousness left him, Carpathian saw his wife falling dead at his side, her body pierced by a single bullet that had gone unnoticed in the cacophony of battle. A new beginning. Carpathian awoke days later atop the casket containing the hex seed. He had been carried many miles away from the carnage, but he barely heard or cared. His wife was dead, and he was delirious with pain. With consciousness came with the realization that both his arms and legs were shattered. He sensed the onset of infection. Death would surely claim him before long. The enlightened made their careful way to Payson, where others of Covenant were waiting for them. The eccentric Dr. Francis Tamberletti immediately took charge of a barely alive Carpathian and began to work on him. And as he recovered, Carpathian put aside his pain and despair of his wife's death and focused instead on the future. If Veronica could not be healed, then perhaps she could be resurrected. He would need to make a war against death itself to achieve this vision. Eiffel had another pair in exile, Emily Roebling, had overseen the renovation and fortification of Payson. The town had become a Promethean complex built on the example of the Welsh chasm. Carpathian dubbed this new home the War Cradle. The entire town had completely been rebuilt to the specifications, combining European architecture with the rough and ready materials of the American West. It contained extensive laboratory and meeting spaces, not to mention formidable defences that would make the town a veritable fortress should it come under attack. Most important of all were the catacombs, excavated beneath the War Cradle, the deepest of which would serve as a vault to securely store the stolen seed. Carpathian dismissed the workers who had helped him before, collapsing the passageways that he had led them down. An alternative route, known only to himself, led back out into the hot, dry air of Payson. As impressive as all this was, or a nigh impossible feat he aimed to achieve, Carpathian knew that he would need resources and a power base in the Union many times larger than he could currently call on. Now his work truly began. The invention of RJ-1027. With the hex seed now shielded securely beneath the War Cradle, Carpathian devoted all his time and resources to experimentation with the essence. He exposed biological matter to the alien mineral and worked to create more of a volatile crimson fluid. Tantalizingly, he discovered that by mixing the fluid with gunpowder or other accelerants, he could greatly increase the potency of weaponry and combustion engines. A process locally known as juicing them. Once he had stockpiled a sufficient quantity and designed suitably armoured and durable stratagem-enhanced containers for it, he announced the Fourth Enlightened Symposium to be held in Payson at the War Cradle. The date of his symposium, the 27th of October 1859, had special significance for Carpathian, as it was also the date of his wedding anniversary. As he stared into the glowing crimson fluid, he felt a connection to his wife, as well as the promise of her eventual resurrection. In the wider world, their authority challenged by the announcement of the Custodian leading and enlightened were in a difficult position. Fearing a further division, Sturgeon and his allies the Welsh Chasm acknowledged both symposium, but claimed security concerns in a rapidly destabilizing union for a reason they could not attend in person. Many enlightened did attend, however, including Princess Shahrazad and distinguished guests such as Amadine Dupin, Giuseppe Garibaldi, and Louis-Georges Charcot. To them, Carpathia unveiled his greatest invention, a new wonder fuel he called RJ-1027. Agents note, presumably Carpathia believes that the pseudoscience of a name would hopefully distance the liquid from its true origins, to a general public as well. As to its peers, though the service is pretty aware of the true nature of RJ-1027, I understand the need for such facts to remain within service at the time. For the enlightened, RJ-1027 represented a near-infinite power source, limited in application only by their imaginations. But it had been developed and designed by Burton Carpathia, the self-proclaimed father of the enlightened, was undisputed. Available for all the world to see, RJ-1027 rapidly became the means by which designs of much the new wave of technology unleashed by the enlightened became possible. Sturgeon reluctantly contacted Carpathia via Loomis telegraph to offer his congratulations, and Carpathia graciously gifted Welsh Chasm with the first shipment of RJ-1027 canisters so that their important work in the vault might benefit. Although some of the enlightened, like Nikola Tesla or Gustav Byron, still favoured power sources they had independently developed, within the 5 years the enlightened were almost exclusively powering their advanced technologies with RJ. The energy contained in an oil drum-sized RJ cylinder could power a family home for 6 months before it would need to be switched for a new one. The spent RJ cylinders would be collected and taken back to the war cradle, where they would be recharged for a small fee. Within a decade, 1 million canisters of RJ-1027 of all different sizes could be found in transit back to the war cradle at any one time. A whole third of the immense factory city built over the safe storage of reprocessing of the canisters. Civil War. The sale and supply of RJ-1027 was only the first step in Carpathia's plan. The cost of processing and generating more of the essence with the secrecy that required was relatively high. The vast majority of the world's fuel requirements were still driven by coal, oil, timber, and gas. This was unlikely to change for the next few decades, as the application of RJ-1027 tended to be for more advanced technologies rather than the day-to-day. Carpathia needed something to drive the purchase and distribution of technologies. Agents note, the Union did not disappoint in this matter. The initial flashpoint in 1861 was over the extensive oil and mineral reserves of Mississippi and Texas. Carpathia and the enlightened loyal to him knew that the power they required for that greater work could only be acquired if these tensions and fears were stoked. Carpathia and his enlightened needed to be in the position to demand autonomy and favour from whichever faction came out on top. To the end, they began to sell juiced rifles, automata, sonic cannons, and of course, the wonder fuel that allowed these infernal devices to be powered to both sides. But when the Civil War erupted in earnest, it was fought with the most destructive weapon ever devised by man. Armies were swept from the field as streams of crimson power flashed beneath the rising clouds of smoke and dust. Armoured landships crawled across the churned muddy ground, dragging off blasts that would have shattered castles. Millions died and the nation was devastated as the war dragged on. The Confederacy and the Union equally matched through the availability of enlightened technology. As year after bloody year passed with no sign of an eventual winner, enlightened elsewhere in the world began to fear that it would never end. They predicted with certainty that the country would be reduced to a smouldering cinder before the war reached a conclusion. Eventually, it was Nikola Tesla who broke the faith with the rest of the enlightened and intervened, despite Sturgeon and the others' peers warning him not to. Taking his voltaic technologies with him, Tesla joined the Union, providing them with what would turn out to be the upper hand. Supported by Tesla, coal-powered automata, the devastating rolling thunder tanks, the war ended within months. The exhausted populace on both sides of the Mason-Dixon line finally brokered an uneasy peace. Agent said, Director Lincoln, have you ever asked Nikolai why he chose the north over the south? Carpavian was furious, watching all of the groundwork he had laid with Confederacy rendered useless with their defeat. He immediately moved to consolidate his holdings through the connections and alliances he had built with Northern interests. The foundations of several Promethean complexes had been established during the war, and now these greatly expanded and reinforced into massive industrial cities on the land ceded to them by newly victorious Union. Enlightenment of the South. Knowing better than any other what the true purpose of enlightenment was, Carpavian directed his servants and acolytes at the War Cradle, making it the most advanced source of weapons and research in the world. The aloof Sturgeon and his allies at Wild Chasm saw the emergence of Carpavian and those who followed him as a dangerous and stable element within the Enlightened. The Union Civil War had been a flashpoint driving on some scientific endeavours around the globe, as well as demand for RJ-1027 and the technologies that it could power. But the conflict had also breathed new life into the egalitarian movement within the Covenant. Now the notions of Carpavian became a credible alternative to principles espoused by Sturgeon. Following the betrayal of Markov and the facilities in the Antarctic have been expanded, with large shipyard and airfield producing all manner of advanced craft to help the Enlightened project their principles across the globe. While Carpavian and his allies have chosen to portion out his advanced technologies equally and fan the flames of industry and conflict, so too have Sturgeon and the rest of the Enlightened taken whatever steps they need necessary against those same nations to ensure that no power gains a decisive advantage. Sturgeon is a lord of Wild Chasm, now a bustling metropolis built around the fabled vault itself and Leonard's Spider, a great port on the Antarctic Peninsula presided over by Maximilian Schneider. From these two Promethean complexes spread a vast network of tunnels, cut and blasted by engineers with drills, ice burners, and tireless TX-1 automata. Underground galleries contain workshops and farms illuminated by sunlight globes, made habitable by atmospheric controls, interconnected by railway and pneumatic pressure tubes. Elsewhere in the world, though not quite to the scale of a Union Civil War, other opportunities had enabled Promethean complexes to be established, though such agreements, the Enlightened, are usually left alone by their host governments, though their methods and attitudes often make for tense relationships with the local populace. The Promethean complex, known as the Gateway, was once a tiny South Atlantic island of South Georgia. This island city is quite literally the entrance to the Antarctic approach, through which all visitors must pass. The Crown is resentful of being manipulated to sell the land to the Enlightened. Agents note, the Crown may be resentful, but I think it is fair to say that now that our dependence on the Enlightened has faded, we are an open aggression here in the Union, particularly against our guests out in the Badlands. Even the general populace now see Carpavian and his peers for what they truly are, opportunistic monsters making coats for themselves out of a widow's weeds. I understand that this mounting antagonism towards the Enlightened has caused Nikolai and his assistants to go to great lengths to distinguish themselves from their Enlightened consuls. Having visited the pipeworks myself, it is clear that beyond the publicly accessible lobby and conference room, the facility is still all intents and purposes a Promethean complex. An Enlightened present. The Enlightened are vastly changed since their founding a quarter of a century ago, now are more self-focused and fractured than before. They are still collectively driven by the ultimate goal of elevating humanity through science. Hulking monstrosities guard their entrances to their labyrinthian Promethean complexes that are dotted around the globe. Overhead, their bizarre and wondrous rotorcraft ferry materials back and forth between these strongholds. It is a folly to mistake their unusual appearance for weakness, as they are bristling with concealed rockets and searing lasers, ready to annihilate any who would threaten them. Similarly, their fleet is unusually hidden from view, beneath the waves, elegantly rising only when they need to use weaponry that cleaves through enemy armor and shields. The Enlightened make prodigious use of their vaunted generator technology, confounding their foes or harry them from new unexpected quarters. Thanks to the actions of the traitor Markov, the clash of nations, and influence of the Hex, the Enlightened plans to control the world through science and technology has come to naught, and the various groups and factions are left scrambling to follow the many counter-agendas they have devised. Though the Covenant of the Enlightened still arrogantly places itself above the petty jingoism of the nations of Earth, rivalries between enlightened members are fierce. Competing designs are often produced in different Promethean complexes in an attempt to earn their inventor prestige amongst their fellow peers, or lucrative contracts should they feel that selling their creations will further their goal. An example of this conflict was seen when Zell Colburn's Black Hoof Automata was replaced as the primary means of personal transport in the Union Army by Erasmus Leavitt's Iron Horse. The sickness and death caused by the primitive atomic batteries resulted in such humiliation for Colburn that he flung himself from the cooling tower of his Promethean complex, the Iron Citadel. Within their Promethean complex, each peer rules as a technological autocrat, and is responsible for maintaining a militia or retinue armed with the latest in enlightened advancements. Some peers make use of extensive mechanical augmentation to create a capable force of physically injured or idealistic volunteers. Others have explored the paths of automation to create marvelous machines capable of the semblance of independent thought processing, able to carry out a variety of tasks with the world's most advanced fleet of naval ships, armored machines, and aircraft. The Enlightened continue to push the envelope of human advancement, harnessing any technologies they can create or reverse engineer. Beyond the predominant ideologies within the Enlightened of egalitarianism or custodianship, reality is more nuanced than each peer pursues. The agenda of the Covenant, in their own special way, is embarked but now spends his time at a vast workhouse complex known as Bletchley, designing ever more impressive engineering feats for his patron, Queen Victoria, who now is convinced that the world was at peace when the Crown's rule was unchallenged. Now puts his great intelligence to work, considering how best to return the Crown to her former glory. For Barnabas Sturgeon, the Belshazzar, it is about developing the secrets of the vault and dealing them with those who would misuse them. For Lady Juliana Jackenberg at the Gateway, it's about keeping an eye on the scientific achievements of the 7 greatest power blocks and eliminating or seizing emerging technologies that would prove a danger to the world. Though these peers and dozens more, the dream of a Sturgeonian age has faded into reality of a dystopian age. It is only a matter of time before the brilliant minds of the Covenant, the Enlightened, are called upon to defend humanity in their darkest hour. Until then, they must each learn to find a place in this era of constant warfare and strife that they themselves have created.